So instead of just giving in to our hardships, why aren't we looking for ways to fight them? Can we please start coming up with solutions? Instead of acknowledging that life is hard and using that as justification to keep on living a hard life. Uh-oh, a fat person disagreed with another fat person. Is fat acceptance crumbling? I hope so. Today we will be answering the question, do all fat women think the same? Or can they agree with their polar opposites, the fits? Jubilee put several of my people into a dimly lit warehouse with a bunch of people who could outrun them, and then they asked several polarizing questions. Is this a recipe for disaster? Let's find out. With this commentary, I aim to prove that not all fat women are stuck within the body positivity and fat acceptance hive mind, and that sometimes we can be realistic when our lifestyles are called into question. Hi, my name is Summer, and I used to weigh 400 pounds. I'm losing weight to better my life, so I have a lot to say about weight loss. And today, I have a lot to say about Jubilee's fit versus fat. Because there are just too many responses to get to each point individually, I will say whether I agree or disagree after each prompt is read. And then I will pick out the fit or fat person that I disagree with the most to hopefully show that I, as a fat, can still be reasonable, and that I have not fallen into crazy extremes Delulu land, and that you don't have to either. The first prompt is,
your physique is in your control.
The moderator goes on to clarify that by physique they mean the size and shape of somebody's body, and with that clarification I have to say that I completely agree with this prompt. Leah also brings up a good point that there are certain things about your body that aren't within your control.
There is a spectrum for your body. Our height isn't under our control, our fat distribution, our bone density, our muscle density, our metabolism.
Yes,
These are all things that make up who we are. But in that spectrum of health, absolutely, we can change who we are with what we got.
But physique being the size and shape of your body, at least to the degree that weight is involved, you can absolutely control that. It doesn't mean that it's easy, just that it's possible. Now, there are actually two groups of thought brought up next that I disagree with. The first surrounds health conditions, and the second surrounds privilege. To start, Lupe brings up thyroid, and Autumn brings up PCOS.
I have family members that have like thyroids and they can't gain weight or they can't lose weight, but I think that they can manage to stay at a place that's gonna be healthy for them.
I didn't step forward because I have PCOS and I just recently got diagnosed with it. So with PCOS, it's so much more difficult for me to lose the weight and control what I want my physique to look like. It's just so much harder. It's not impossible.
I agree that these conditions can absolutely impact somebody's ability to lose weight, but again, that doesn't make it impossible. We really need to start pushing back on the idea that just because something is difficult, that the action or even the topic of discussion should be avoided. Because that's what we are saying when we bring up the hardships of personal conditions that impact weight management without offering even a single solution. I would go even further and argue that poor health conditions outside of weight are an even bigger argument for why somebody should be working harder to achieve better health. Hardships like PCOS and thyroid can be made easier to manage with improved overall health. They don't have to be the reason why you can't improve your health. To give you a very personal example, I have EOE, or eosinophilic esophagitis. And though this disorder does not impact my weight itself, my weight does impact my ability to take care of myself. It also impacts my body's ability to heal when I'm inflamed due to my condition. Similarly, the things that I eat directly impact my condition, but they don't get to dictate what I eat. Only I can make that conscious decision for myself. And both the things that I eat and their quantities will respectively contribute to my weight. Bottom line, some foods and eating styles will help or harm me, and only I get to decide which I engage in. We need to stop viewing health as one-dimensional, that any diagnosis is something that dooms us to live with excess weight and stops us from achieving the lifestyle or physique that we want. Because that's just not the case. Some things will impact you harder. Some things will be bigger obstacles that other people don't have to deal with. That shouldn't be used as an excuse to let yourself live a life that you don't want to live. It all comes down to how healthy you are overall. Yes, it's about weight. Yes, it's about other personal health conditions that you need to manage. but it's also about how much you eat, what you eat, how much you sleep, how you manage stress. And ultimately, it's about what you believe. Because what you think is your truth and you will believe yourself every time. But all of that to say that the weight issue is multifaceted, and ultimately believing that something is impossible just because you face a barrier is unrealistic. And you might have to come to terms with the fact that you're probably doing yourself and others a disservice by being too close-minded about weight loss. Speaking of barriers, the positions that Jade brings up next are some that I nearly completely disagree with.
So while of course there are aspects that I think you can control about your physique, I think there are more things that are out of your control. Like, it is so much more expensive to eat healthy than it is to eat like crap. If I go to the grocery store and I just want to buy a bunch of frozen meals, that's going to be so much cheaper than me going and buying fresh produce and fresh fruit and everything.
All food right now is expensive, but buying ingredients to make meals, though it might appear more expensive in the short term, will always stretch further and provide more food in the long run than buying fast food ever will. And I will stand by that, especially if you have a family to feed. Do you know how fast the dollar menu adds up when feeding an entire family? For example, here's a picture of the dollar menu at my closest McDonald's. To be fair, maybe it's different for people who live in different areas, but I don't see a single dollar item in sight. The bottom line is that to me, this opinion is an extremely harmful misconception that hurts not only a person's physical health, but their financial health. And those are two of the things that I care the most about. Like Alyssa points out, it may be cheaper in the short term, but in the long run, it will absolutely cause harm to not only your health, but your wallet.
I think that you definitely, in the short-term mindset, it is cheaper. You go to a fast food restaurant, they have like a dollar menu. I think they've even increased the dollar menu now. So, which is crazy. It's like a $2 menu. So that's valid, I think, but I think it's killing us in the long term. Like, it's like that short dopamine effect, the dopamine where you're like, oh, I just need something right now. Yeah. I think that's the issue.
Now that we know that the price of food isn't really the issue, let's talk about cooking.
Other than like food costs, like there's also privilege when it comes to like having time to cook stuff.
Definitely,
like if you
100%,
work a full-time job,
100%.
if you have kids and stuff, a lot of the time it's just easier. You don't have the time and energy. Like, I enjoy cooking, but it's a lot of work sometimes, and it's much easier for me to just like go through the drive-through.
I think the key word here is easier. It is so much easier to go through a drive-through than it is to cook. It just is. Easier, tastier, and even more fun because of the dopamine release that you get from eating those kinds of foods. So yes, I do agree with her there. And I would know, because I lived a very easy life. Up until I didn't. Because I could no longer walk for more than 10 minutes. And I know that not everybody who indulges in fast food will reach the weight that I reached or will live the kind of life that I lived, but easier for you does not mean better. Easier does not mean satiating or nutritious. Easier in this case, I would argue, is not something that should be advocated for when trying to support yourself, let alone a family. If it's once in a blue moon and you really are too exhausted to cook, then by all means, take the night off to rest, grab something quick. But to make it a habit that you rely on is so damaging, and it can take you to a place, you and your family to a place, that is so much harder to get back from than it would have been to just cook dinner. I know that's an extreme example, but with the rising obesity rates and the way that we talk about obesity in general, it is not far off to assume that more and more families are going to follow down this path of what's easier is what we should be relying on. I don't have kids, but I do have a full-time job, and I cook nearly every meal because I prep in advance. It's not fun, it's not glamorous, it's not even easy sometimes, but it is so much better than the alternative. And yes, it did take me a couple years to get to the point where I was cooking every meal at home. But I made one little change at a time, and I made it this far because of it. I even highlighted the entire process that I went through, every single little change over the last 3 years to reach 85 pounds down in a previous video, and I will link that for you in the description. The shift does not have to be dramatic, and in fact, it should be slow, because it will lessen the hardship of change. But when you highlight the hardships that others have in this way, it almost sounds like you're saying that individual circumstances should just be accepted because changing is too difficult. And I think that that is a massive disservice to those people that want better for themselves and for their families. Working full-time, being exhausted after work, raising a family are all very realistic hardships and obstacles that everyday regular people have to deal with. But can we please start coming up with solutions? Instead of acknowledging that life is hard and using that as justification to keep on living a hard life. For example, if you are a busy person who doesn't like to cook, invest in a slow cooker. All you have to do is prep and clean up. The cooking is done by the machine. We live in the future. Finally, for this prompt, Jade goes on to talk about mental health.
And then also privilege when it comes to like your mental health. When you are depressed, when you're struggling to even like get through the day, it can be really hard to have that motivation to eat well, to move your body and stuff. So for then when people are like, oh, well, why aren't you working out? It's like, dude, I can barely even get out of bed. So like, please stop with that.
You know when my mental health was at its worst? When I was 400 pounds. I know that that doesn't represent everybody's experience, but when we're talking about the ability to change your physique and the rebuttal is mental health, I do think that my story is relevant here. Treating your body better with healthier foods, increased physical activity, reduced stress, increased sleep have all proven to help your physical and mental health. So instead of just giving in to our hardships, why aren't we looking for ways to fight them? And I will say that if your mental health is that bad, then maybe weight shouldn't be our focus. But a healthier you overall will make a world of difference in your temperament and your quality of life. Like I said earlier, health is multifaceted. Next, prompt.
Body positivity can promote unhealthy habits.
I completely agree. And basically for the reasons that Bria and Alyssa agree.
I think blind body positivity can be harmful if it's just like always like don't ever consider any possibility that you could change something or improve your quality of life. Just blindly accept yourself. I think that's where it can get kind of toxic.
Yeah, I think the pendulum has switched to the furthest extreme. I think body positivity was created because there wasn't a space for people who could have acceptance in bigger bodies. And I think it's just gone to the furthest extreme now.
I think loving yourself independent of your size is hugely important. But I also think that loving yourself enough to know when change is needed to support health and improve quality of life is even more important. At 400 pounds, I loved myself and my family enough to start changing and to hopefully increase the time that I have in this life. And each and every day that I have fought for my health since has been another way that I have shown how much I care about myself and my longevity. And that doesn't mean that I only love myself when I eat perfect or when I'm losing weight. It just means that I am no longer giving into that lizard brain that dictated my eating habits for so long without a fight. Getting into the part that I disagree with the most for this prompt, what's pretty silly is that the person I disagree with actually agreed to the prompt.
Like my
What's
kid.
obese for you?
Like an unhealthy lifestyle.
No,
like
but like, what do you
overweight.
mean what's obese for you?
Obese, like a
Like for
medically
me,
obese.
if you see me, you
What's the
consider me
range?
obese?
I wouldn't say that you're obese, but
Okay.
it's like medically,
So,
you know.
so like for
So
example,
you're medically obese though?
no,
Yes.
I've been medically obese since I was like 12 and I was not obese. I think an obese person, and this is not, calling absolutely anybody obese, but I think a person that can be considered obese will not be able to go on walks, they will lose their breath, for me, because I am a person that I'm big, but like I said, I'm still able to go on hikes and I won't lose my breath. I can go on runs, I can exercise. So if for the
you're-
doctors I'm obese because of the
Yes.
size and the stuff that
Yes.
I am, for the doctors,
Yes.
for me, it is not the way that it works because an obese person, I've had friends who are skinnier than me. We go on walks and they're losing their breath.
So for you, obesity is just the
fact-
health parameter of how physical you can be. For you,
Exactly.
it's not a physical manifestation
Exactly.
of the body.
Obesity is a medical term and that's it. It is an accurate classification based on weight and size, and that is all it has to be. If any other term were to be used in place of obesity, I'm sure that people would still take offense to it because it is very hard to acknowledge when you have reached a certain classifiable level of unhealthiness, and I would know. If someone wants to make blanket assumptions or shitty jokes based on somebody's weight classification, then that's on them. That is not on you. But the medical terminology is really just the fact of the matter. It can be extremely difficult to face, but it does not have to make you feel bad. It is just something that now needs to be prioritized. So to say something like, for me, that's not the way it works, that's not the way medical terminology or obesity or health works. You are or you are not obese, and it doesn't have to mean more than that if you don't want it to. Uh-oh, a fat person disagreed with another fat person. Is fat acceptance crumbling? I hope so. Next prompt.
I have taken a weight loss drug.
Trigger warning in this section, I am going to be talking about some ED related topics. I have personally never taken a weight loss drug, nor do I intend to, but in high school I did abuse laxatives for a couple of months. I think the thought process that I had at the time was something like, oh no, I overate again, and I need to get this food out of me as fast as possible so that I can be clean again. And that's pretty messed up for sure. Looking back on it, I can see that it's messed up, but when you're in the midst of self-harm, essentially, you can't really see it objectively. Getting back into the prompt, however, I'm not inherently against medication, and I do think that everyone should make the decision that feels right for them. But I do think that whatever weight loss method you choose to engage in, you should be using that time to heal your relationship with food, because that is what all your hard work will boil down to in the end. Faster doesn't always mean better. So if you take a certain route that gets you to a healthier place faster without learning how to maintain that lifestyle, it's going to be so much easier to backslide into old, harmful habits and behaviors. Which is basically what Jade says in her response, up until she starts talking about how counting calories can be harmful for some people, which I don't necessarily disagree with. It really depends on the individual.
I've heavily considered taking Ozempic, but I've decided not to because you either have to stay on that drug long term to keep those effects, or if you get off of it, most people are gonna gain the weight back. So I'm no longer interested in anything that is not a complete lifestyle change.
To be honest, overall for this prompt, I really agree with everybody, but especially Dana.
And I'm like a very big believer in that phrase, like if you wanted to, you could. Wouldn't you be so much happier if you lost the weight and you look back on it and it was like, yeah, like I did that.
Exactly.
You know, like that was 100% all me. I didn't need no help. I didn't need no cheat codes. Like this was the work that I put in and I got the results that I wanted.
It will always come down to the individual person and what they prioritize in terms of either bettering their lifestyle or remaining in their current situation. Just because change is hard or you run into obstacles that you didn't anticipate doesn't mean that staying the same is your only option. You can make small changes over time and they will add up exponentially. It all comes down to what you want and the effort that you put in regardless of your obstacles. I challenge you to pick an achievable goal and to change just one thing about your lifestyle that will get you closer to that goal. Just one thing. And only after you have mastered that one thing can you add another thing that will get you closer to your goal. And then another, and so on and so forth. And it's more than likely that when you look around after some time, life might look a little different. Next prompt.
Fit women are more attractive than fat women.
I think women are attractive. Next prompt. But really, people are attracted to others on a wide spectrum, and trying to boil it down to one group of people being more attractive than the rest just really doesn't work. And not that I completely disagree with Dana here, but I do want to point a few things out.
I would definitely agree. Fit women are more attractive than like plus size women, only because me having this body, it shows that I can commit to something, right? And it shows that I'm hardworking, so I feel like men looking at my body can see, oh, okay, she's dedicated. She put in the work, and that could be an attractive quality that men see in me. I would definitely go for like a more muscular guy. So that kind of shows that we have something in common, something that we can work on together.
So gym dates?
Yeah, gym dates, for sure.
With all the best faith in the world, I do know where she's coming from. But also, reaching 400 pounds was a commitment too. Not that I ever wanted it, but my fat gains were the longest commitment that I ever had. I was dedicated and I put in the work too. Also, if I look at a stranger, my first thought isn't necessarily that they're hardworking. Unless they're like working on a roof or something, or maybe I do see them in the gym, then maybe that would make more sense. But that's really independent and regardless of size. Maybe if I was deeper into the fitness space, I could understand her perspective better. But for the average person, I would really just see someone who is slim. Maybe even someone that I aspire to live like lifestyle-wise, but you never really know what someone's life looks like from the outside. Finally, I do think that having a compatible lifestyle with your partner is something that is important, especially if you're trying to build a life together that's cohesive, so I do agree with her there. Next, prompt.
It's okay for models to set a high standard for body image.
This one was tough for me to answer, and I don't necessarily disagree with anybody, so I'll mainly just give my opinion. I think a health standard is reasonable, but specific body standards can get really toxic really fast, and when we're talking about models, we're not really talking about health standards, are we? So if we're talking about fit or thin, without delving too deep into the specific body parts that you can't change without surgery, then I think that's okay. But anything that says that we should chase thinness at all costs or uphold a specific standard of beauty is unrealistic, because it is impossible for everybody to fit into the same mold. And I do think that standards can get so high and unrealistic that nobody can achieve them, not even the models. I liken it to Nara Smith. Societally beautiful, alluring, could absolutely sell a product, but as a lifestyle and body standard, it's wholly unattainable for the majority of people. And I do think that aspiring to live like that or look like that could be motivational, but it's when you get into the comparison territory that things can really get harmful. Ultimately, I don't think that we need models or standards that are representative of the extremes. I don't need a model that's 500 pounds, and I don't need a model that's 80 pounds. And on top of that, both are often photoshopped to represent a standard or type of perfection that doesn't even exist. Next, prompt.
Women should be fit enough to protect themselves.
Oh my god, yes. Absolutely yes. This is one of the strongest driving forces behind my weight loss. And I'm not even talking about protecting myself from another person. I'm thinking in terms of, if I fall, can I get up? If there's a fire, can I climb down a ladder? If there is an emergency or danger, can I run away from it? And the answer to these questions being no for years has really, really driven me to increase my physical activity and better my health overall. The world can be a very scary and dangerous place, and you should be ready to protect yourself no matter who you are, man or woman. Next, prompt.
I have abused my body.
Again, there was nothing to really disagree with here, so I will just answer the prompt for myself. And warning, there will be a lot more specific ED talk in this section, so if that's something that you will find harmful for yourself, please end the video here, and I will see you in the next one. First off, Leia, with this following quote, really hit home for me.
Addiction is the disease that tells your brain that the problem is the solution.
I have a long history of abusing my body as it pertains to food and to eating. In middle school, I starved myself. I would try to see how long I could go before I had to eat again, and I would always make it 3 days. And by the 4th, I would cave in and I would eat, and I would always attribute it to lack of willpower, when really I was just hungry. By the end of middle school and into early high school, I would over-exercise and I would purge. Each time I binged, I would force myself to walk it off, and I think I would walk up to 6 miles each time I binged. When that didn't work, I cycled into binging and purging, and when that started to hurt too much, I started to abuse laxatives for a couple of months, as I mentioned earlier. Finally, by the end of high school, I just completely gave in to my binge eating. Of course, I would cycle between binge eating and this is the last time forever, I promise, this time, until I eventually reached 400 pounds and I was finally at my rock bottom. Life kept getting harder, and I kept feeling more alone and too weak to lose the weight, and my self-worth just completely flatlined. Independent of even my weight, I truly just hated myself for never being able to just stop and be normal when it came to eating or food, when really I just needed some compassion and some help. Every time I tried to lose weight because of my size, I was ultimately driven to eat more because of the desperation and hatred that I felt. And then it got to the point where food was the only thing that was making me feel better. It was the only dopamine fix or happiness that I was getting. So if somebody says that weight's not the problem, that's probably what they're talking about. But I grew up in a household where these behaviors were displayed. So my weight problem and my obsession were deeply rooted because they stemmed from my upbringing. Becoming aware of how poorly I treated myself and realizing that weight itself wasn't necessarily the problem, but that the problem was my mentality around food and health and how I perceived and treated myself was ultimately what drove me to start changing. It's probably why I feel so strongly about the extremes that I've seen surrounding weight, and why I've officially decided to push back on them. And honestly, what Jade said really rang true for me.
If I keep hurting myself, I'm not just hurting myself, I'm hurting the people who love me the most.
I was never able to be strong for myself. And I know that people say that you should be, but I couldn't do it. But part of what really helped me start changing was seeing how I was hurting my family and my now husband, and wanting to prove to them that I could be okay, that I could make this change and one day take care of them in the future when they need it. Instead of going down the same path that I was going down at 400 pounds and maybe one day needing a full-time caretaker for myself, if I even lived long enough to need one. That really drove me to change. I know that ended on a really somber note, and I really appreciate you being here for that. Hopefully it shows you why I feel so strongly about pushing back against fat acceptance and the mutated body positivity extremes that we're seeing today. Because I think in the long run, people are going to have more stories that are similar to mine, and I don't want to see that. I want to see a future where people are fighting for their health, not for their fat acceptance. So what do you think? Did I prove that not all fat women think the same? And that we can be reasonable in this nuanced conversation surrounding health? I hope so, but please let me know how you're feeling in the comments. That's all for now. Please don't forget to subscribe so that we can reach our goals together. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.
So catch me if I fall.
Yes, it's about your diagnoses. Diagnoses? I don't like the way I say that.